I'm going to wait for people to get in here. Get the chat up so that we can have a conversation, hopefully. That's the objective, anyway. I think one of my least favorite parts of these live streams is waiting for it to show up. This beginning part, where I feel like I'm just talking to myself. It's different than when you're recording a video and talking to yourself because you know what you're doing. This is like looking in the mirror and talking. There we go. It's up. It's up. Now let's see if anybody's going to come in here. The other day, I didn't put on my jacket. I didn't put on my shirt that I usually film in. I filmed in what I called my house clothes. And I'm kind of glad I did, because I was wearing my favorite shirt to bum around the house in. And that very day, it ripped massively, and it was just over. And I got the Hulk Hogan the thing off. And that was the end of my favorite shirt. So you guys got to see my favorite shirt, that old raggedy thing. That was kind of fun. Susan Stack, cheers from Alberta. Cheers to you, Susan, from Saskatchewan. Barbara, hello, what a surprise to see you pop in. Yeah, you know, I was going to just film a normal video today, but I thought I'll just go live instead because people might appreciate that. It's Saturday. It's still noon. You're supposed to go live in the evenings, but, you know, I hate going live in the evenings. I really do. I'd rather talk in the morning when I'm all fresh, even though it's not morning right now. But there's been some interesting new information come out as regards the Kirk assassination. Hello, Faye, from Cornwall, Ontario. Good to see you. And I'd like to go over it, actually, with you guys. And then maybe many of you in the comments section will, bring your best counter arguments or bring your arguments as to why I shouldn't even be thinking about this subject. And I think it's a really important subject. Not just the Kirk assassination, but the approach the U.S. administration is taking to Ukraine, the approach the U.S. is taking to the Middle East. I think all of these things are really important because rewind the clock a year, and it's September of 2024 before the election. What was the beacon of hope for any thinking person? The beacon of hope was this idea that we could break free of the prevailing narrative and the prevailing direction and the establishment politics of the Democrats and Kamala Harris and all this sort of stuff, and maybe the world could be dragged kicking and screaming in a new direction. Or maybe, if that wasn't the case, North America could extricate itself from all of these geopolitical issues. And here we are. It's September of 2025, and the whole idea is on the ropes. Domestically, the United States is changing somewhat, but on the foreign policy file, things are really aligning towards this neoconism, if you will. And I find that disconcerting, and I find the lack of curiosity about the Kirk assassination on the part of the administration and its appointees. And I find that what I would call the mainstream alternative media is very eager to just move on from this, even though it's really quite sketchy. I don't have a lot of answers. The only thing that I am certain of is that the round and the gun and the whole Tyler Robinson narrative as the lone gunman doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And now you can have all kinds of theories in the world, but that alone does not explain what we've seen happen in Utah. Back to the chat for a minute. BC NDP killing jobs in this province. Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they do, and they've been doing it for a long time. I'm actually working on a video to go over some of the history of organized crime in Canada, because I've talked about this on the channel, how mass scale the presence of cartels are, how they've infiltrated our government. We're talking billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in drug money getting washed through this country's real estate. Still to this day, there's a bit of a break on it because there's eyes on the story. But the fact is Canada is completely overrun, but it's not a new thing. You can go all the way back to the 1960s and the 1970s if you want to find the seeds of this. And actually, the charter that Trudeau brought in made it a lot harder for police to uncover and disrupt this stuff. So that's something I'm working on. I was up until 2, 3 in the morning last night working on that. Alberta independence, Canada's done so over. It would be nice to see an independence movement gain the appropriate steam it needs to overcome the obstacles that are set out before it. I'd like to see it, that's for sure. Greetings from the West Kootenays, BC. Crazy times. Appreciate hearing your opinions, Frank. Hi from Alberta. Really thought Trump would stop Ukraine and Russian war, or at the very least, if you can't get it stopped, get the United States out of direct involvement in it and inflaming it. I mean, the rhetoric has changed. I mean, to the point where Zelensky was surprised when Trump said that NATO countries should start shooting down Russian jets that violate their airspace, because it's not so much that the Russians wouldn't be wrong for violating the airspace. It's that you're opening the door for an escalation, for one thing, and then on the other hand, you're opening the door for a convincing false flag because, again, Europe, for whatever reason, really wants this war. They want to get involved, but they need to drag the United States with them. And so by openly calling for the shooting down of Russian jets, Trump's creating an opportunity to create a pretext for this sort of escalation. And I am not of the opinion that an escalation from NATO, I don't think that it's a slow, gradual escalation. I think once everybody gets directly involved, it goes nuclear very fast because that's the only way it works. That's the only way nuclear weapons work. You have to strike first, and strike quick, and strike massively. There's no like graduated nuclear war unless the whole thing's orchestrated, which I don't believe you can do that. It's very disappointing to me. It's very disappointing to me. And now Europe's hatched this plan where they are going to go ahead. Germany was against it at first, and now it seems Germany's in favor of it, of seizing Russian assets and using them directly to fund the Ukraine war. Lavrov went to the UN. If you don't know, Lavrov is the Russian foreign minister, and he basically said that NATO's already at war with Russia. These are all really big problems. They're existential problems. Like, for those of you who don't understand, the root of the word existential is it's an existence issue. These are existential problems. Over what? Over Ukraine. Over a war that could have been avoided. Over a war that multiple peace agreements were on the table and were torpedoed by the West. I don't want to die for these people. I don't want to die for this cause. I don't want my children to get drafted and sent off to die. If there's any, I don't even know if we get to the draft stage. Again, the only way nuclear weapons work is if you are the first one to use them. What do you see as the largest geopolitical issues affecting us here in Canada that our government is bought and paid for by China, that our government is completely dominated and sold out to international interests, that our resource sector has an enormous amount of foreign money involved in it, that we are overrun by crime, that basically if you're talking about a geopolitical crisis for Canada, we are not a nation. We are a colony. And we're not a colony for one nation, which might not be so bad. We're a colony for many nations. Mass immigration is probably our greatest geopolitical issue right now in Canada. And there's not I don't see relief in sight. I mean, maybe things would be arguably better under the Conservative government. I believe that during the election, if we had a Conservative government, that files like criminal justice would improve. But they're too afraid. They're too afraid of the narratives that will align against them. It's come anyway. It doesn't matter what they do. The media, which is bought and paid for, like the Conservatives are out in the open with one of the worst things they could ever say if you're a liberal or you're involved in the media, and that is that they would end the funding of the media, that they would cut the lifeline off, that they would privatize the CBC. So if that's your baseline position, the media is never going to be friendly to you. So why worry about what they say? You got to start writing the narrative. You got to stop living up to it and trying to avoid it. Like it's like this is you got to get active. You got to get involved. You got to get all about that action. You got to start writing the narrative. You got to generate those negative headlines every single day. Give them something. There's a big chunk of this country that's always going to hate you, and there's nothing you can do about that. But you can certainly win the middle through a show of strength and sense. And it's not about the rhetoric so much as it is using the platform that the Conservative Party has to educate Canadians on the issues. Again, Poilievre has the ability to call a press conference anytime, and that press conference can go on for hours. He's got a free platform. He's a smart guy. He's a good debater. He could use that platform to educate the Canadian public as to how things actually work and what the actual problems are, and, have a debate, like actually try and change the issue. Not the smiling, not the sloganeering, not the talking points, but like actually get involved, get active. That's what they need to do. And they're not doing that. Sam Cooper's book, Willful Blindness, is very revealing regarding the depth of organized crime in Canada. It is indeed, and that's part of what I'm going over again, is that book, for sure. Kelly A. says, I've read it. It was good. Read Reportage by James Corbett. Also a good read. I've never heard of that one. You know what? I'm going to copy that right now. I'm going to pump it into a web page, and we'll move on. I'll come back to that later. Boila Hillier? Did I get that right? Bula Hillier? Watching from Alberta. Hello to you. Shit Wrangler. Deindustrialization that results in a bunch of crappy service jobs. Yeah, we don't make anything anymore. We're a raw material exporter. We're a source of easy capital for cartels to sell our drug-addicted people drugs so that they can get all kinds of $20 bills. They used to rinse them through casinos. I don't even think they need to go to that length anymore because they basically own our government. It's kind of crazy. Bo La Rosa, Gulfport, Mississippi. Ted, watching from the ostrich farm. So you're there on site. Kind of interesting how all of the protests of all the people that are there and the farm itself led to nothing but one native land claim got the Supreme Court involved. And it might be good for the ostrich farm, but it is not good for property rights here in Canada, which don't exist anyway. I've covered that on the channel, how you don't have property rights. But I think the situation can get far worse. Do you know that in Vancouver, I think specifically Victoria, I can't remember what it's called. I'm just going from memory. I was reading about this the other day. I haven't had a chance to cover it yet. And when I do, I'll go into more detail about it. But there's a voluntary native reparations tax in addition to your normal property taxes that you can opt into. It's rent, basically, that you would pay to the reserves. Reserves, which sit on Crown land, which aren't, like, the land isn't even owned by the reserve. Like, everybody's getting screwed under this arrangement. But I suppose as long as there's money involved, there's easy money involved from the taxpayer, there's all this virtue signaling, I guess nobody cares if they actually own anything, if they actually have any title or right to the land that they're on. All the reserves they're leased. The land is leased from the Crown. And it sucks. The Indian Act sucks. But right now, I suppose the situation is at least saving those ostriches for a time. And I suppose that's a good, but there's a much bigger issue. Crime in many ways is sadly what's sustaining our economy. Yes, you're so right. You're so right. That's what led to the massive real estate bubble is crime and money laundering. I put the numbers on it in previous videos. I blew my own mind in researching those videos and the kinds of numbers that I came up with. I couldn't believe it. We're talking like double-digit percentages of GDP. The part of GDP, like so much of GDP, when you start digging into what the gross domestic product calculation actually is, you find out a lot of it's just fake numbers anyway. Fictional rent, I covered that on this channel. How if you own your house outright, 1/3 of Canadians do. If you own your house outright, there's economists in Ottawa that calculate the rent that you would pay if you didn't own your house for that third of the population, and then they input that into the GDP. money that doesn't exist, money that never changed hands, rent that you should have paid or could have paid but didn't have to because you owned your house. They also calculate the value of your backyard garden, and they input that into the GDP. And then you figure out drug trafficking and money laundering and human trafficking, carjacking, all of these things. When you factor it into the GDP, crime is like anywhere from a seventh to a fifth of our GDP, and that's real money. It's one of our largest industries after government. It probably is the second largest industry in this country after government, and government's not an industry. Government gets their money from the real economy, and God only knows how big the real economy is in Canada. And how, it's GDP is largely fake. It's kind of crazy when you start digging into it. Could the U.S. buy Canada from Britain? I don't think it's that simple. Canada is going to run a $100 billion deficit. That's what I'm assuming, Bassomatic, next year. For sure we are. And at the same time, it's so funny because the public service massively voted for the Liberals. And Carney's come along and he's basically said, we're going to cut the public service. So we could actually see a bureaucratic strike. The very people who support the Liberal Party are about to get screwed too. And it's that saying. You didn't say anything when they were screwing everybody else over. You didn't say anything during the Freedom Convoy. Well, you're about to learn what it's all about. This is about Mark Carney. This is about his friends. This is about a central banker taking control of Canada and carving it up to enhance his portfolio value and to enhance the bottom lines of his friends. This guy was parachuted in here. They do fake press conference. I showed you. They pour a concrete pad. They bring in a fake construction site at your expense. I'm guessing your expense. I don't actually know that. Somebody paid to build that fake construction site. They come in for less than an hour, and they do a presser. And then as soon as they leave, the cranes come in and take the construction site down, and everybody leaves. And now all that's left in Ottawa is that concrete pad. Fake. It's all fake. And your media is not telling you it's fake. And then people wonder why. I absolutely have to ask questions about everything, including the Kirk assassination, where the official story doesn't make any sense. They didn't follow, when it comes to Charlie Kirk, they didn't follow basic investigative procedures. The stuff that you would see, as I've highlighted on this channel ad nauseum, if you go over to YouTube channels like Explore With Us or any other number of channels that look at real criminal cases where they get all the body cam footage from the police, they get all the legal documents, they get all the interrogation footage from the police stations, and they painstakingly tell the story of violent crime. It's tragic. There's so much education you can get from that, but at the same time, you can only stomach so much of it because you're only seeing the grossest evil in society. But one of the, I believe the word is corollaries, whatever. I shouldn't use words I don't know. One of the knock-on lessons that you can get out of it is how proper investigative procedure works. Like, when the police show up at some trailer in Alabama where some impoverished person has killed some other impoverished person, there is a very thorough procedure and massive amounts of resources poured into figuring out exactly what happened. None of that is happening for Kirk. Same as you can see in other political assassinations. Proper investigative procedure. And it's scary to me when a website that I rely on a lot, one of my favorite websites, Zero Hedge, has not talked about the Kirk assassination for days. It is disappearing from the alternative media. And there's this whole citizens-led investigation going on, trying to figure things out, to the point where what I'm going to show you in this video, in this live stream, is that there's an individual. Maybe we should go to that right now. Let's check chat, then we'll go to that. Canada is going to run 100 million. Oh, chat's already broken. Didn't follow procedures at 9/11 either. I worked in policing. That was an inside job. Dude. 3 towers, 2 planes. I will not, and I will never, suspend from my mind the things that physics tell me. Buildings, and by the way, Building 7 was not built like the 2 towers, so if you accept the pancake theory of collapse for the 2 towers, you can't accept the same theory for Building 7, which also collapsed into its own footprint. That didn't happen because of kitchen fires. And the nonsense about gas being stored in kitchens, which is absolutely There's an R word that describes how insulting it is to your intelligence to believe that. So I will never believe that. The official story is junk. And the funny thing is that we're actually getting some, and I say some, disclosure. I don't know if it's full disclosure. I don't know. You know, it's really hard to figure out who actually constitutes the good actors when it comes to media and alternative media. I mean, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, but I'll tell you, Tucker Carlson has published some very interesting interviews. Not just the 9/11 series he's doing now. It's a 6-episode series that he's putting out. But he's done interviews within the last couple months with insiders and people that were there, people who were congressmen, talking about this very thing and the nature of the cover-up of 9/11. There's a lot we don't know, but that first episode, everybody should go and watch it. I think it only dropped 2 or 3 days ago. And it just talks about how the intelligence agencies knew. These guys, these so-called hijackers, they were operating in the open. Like, they weren't trying to hide their presence. Everybody knew and nothing was done. So the official story on 9/11 is junk. And if that story 25 years later is still junk, is still a cover-up, then you can bet your bottom dollar you should be asking questions about everything. You should always ask questions, and you shouldn't be shamed out of it. 9/11 was disturbing from the top. Wish I could join you. My partner thinks I'm a conspiracy theorist and all as well. Yeah, you know what? I've never had so much pressure to stop talking about a subject. And I've never seen so many fake accounts that I'm assuming they're fake accounts that show up in the comment section spamming bad ideas that I've never seen comment before. And then you do a search of comment history, because on the back end you can actually see how many times a person's commented and what they've commented on and how much. And I usually don't do that sort of stuff because I'm not really interested in the analytics. I just want to put out videos, and I want to put out as good a quality videos as I can, which, by the way, the people who are commenting on the fact that the mic makes noise, I'm going to fix that. I need to build a mic stand that's independent of my desk. I'm sorry I haven't done that. But I just want to put out good stuff, and I don't really think too much about the analytics. Beyond keeping an eye on things. But I've never seen so many, on any subject, so many accounts show up that are just spamming bad information or invective. Alex Jones lasted all of 6 hours on YouTube. What a joke. Yeah, that's interesting too. Keep it real and raw. Will do. Okay. All right, let's bring some stuff up here. Let's hope our technology is just working today, because there's been an incredible, what I call an incredible development, and I'm going to do my best to explain it live in real time. I know what I want to talk about, but hopefully I'm effective at talking about it. This is an account on X, and it's Blake Bednar's, and he actually paid money out of his own pocket for raw video for high quality. Because, okay, so this is one thing I'd like to address right now. Everybody wonders why, when you get UFO footage, why is it so grainy? Or why is the footage that comes from the cell phones so grainy when we know that we can film from cell phones and we can film from cameras at much higher quality? Why is it so grainy? A lot of the times, I'm not saying every time, but a lot of the times it has to do with compression, and it has to do with, you have a very high quality digital format that your phone films in, and when you upload it online, it's necessary to shrink the file size, and when you shrink the file size, you lose detail. And so every time something's uploaded, downloaded, re-uploaded, you're losing a bit more detail, and that's why you end up with so much of this granular footage. It's once you understand that, you can kind of understand. But the best thing that you can do is you can get the raw footage. You can analyze the metadata so that you know when it was taken, how it was taken. There's some people that are alleging that this guy's footage is fake. It's not. We know the camera that he filmed it from, or sorry, we know the camera that the footage was filmed from, and we know how he got it because he explains it. It's just high quality footage. Now, I don't want to play it. It doesn't. He's edited it in such a way that, like, you can get the raw footage, but he's edited it in such a way that you don't see the blood and everything else. But it's kind of disturbing to some people. But the reason this footage is important is it's almost miraculous because it captures something we hadn't seen before, which I think is cavitation from a high-powered rifle round hitting Kirk. And cavitation is something you can only really capture it and capture what it looks like if you have a camera that's filming something like 10,000 frames per second, like a super detailed slow motion camera where you can slow it down and actually see what's happening at that scale. So when you're filming with a normal camera or you're filming with a cell phone, what you have is 30 frames per second typically, which sounds like a lot, but when you're dealing with something that's moving that fast with that much force, it's not enough. So what this footage did is it actually captured what I think is cavitation. Now, what's cavitation? You can look it up, but it's basically the force of the impact of the bullet when it hits something. Could be ballistics gel, could be a body, could be a deer, but it creates a cavity from all that force inside. And so there's this expansion and then there's this contraction. And in that process, everything surrounding it is destroyed. And oftentimes the bullet will fragment in the process and cause even more damage. Another thing I address very quickly is there's this notion of deflection, right? So that that Tyler fired the round, 30-06 round. I was actually watching late last night. Again, the whole sleep thing has not been solved yet. I need more sleep. But you can get 30-06 rounds that have less gunpowder and don't fire as hard. They still pack a hell of a punch. Like, you're talking a couple thousand foot-pounds of impact strength and kinetic energy. It's a whole lot. It doesn't matter how you play with the round. It's a whole lot. There's nothing sufficient from the angle that we're told Robinson shot from in Charlie Kirk's neck to stop that round. It should have taken his head off if Tyler Robinson fired that shot. It's as simple as that. So people have speculated that there were credit card guns or there were cell phone guns or that the lapel mic blew up and that's where the bullet came from. This video, again, you can go and watch this stuff yourself if you want. Man, I almost want to play it, but I know it disturbs some people. But this is, okay, so this is the camera that it was taken from. He purchased this footage. He actually gave them a financial inducement to get this footage. You know what? We're going to play it. Oh, no, that's not going to work. I can't make it big like that. So what we'll do is we'll skip to... Okay, so this is the frame. This is like a 1 in a million capture. Because normally, like I said, you need a camera that's shooting 10,000 frames per second to actually capture cavitation. So this is a really lucky frame. And there's really only two relevant frames. There's this one. It's not going to let me play. Did the internet drop? Hopefully we're still live. Let me just check the chat. Are we still live? Is this still working? Why wasn't he wearing his bulletproof vest? He made a decision, Pure, to drop the bulletproof vest. That's a decision that they made. Also, the security team that they used for this event, they hadn't used since 2020. So they were brought back in, which is also interesting. Wallflower, he did wear one. He just stopped. So he did have vests in the past, but not for this and not for a while. The whole story, so like the whole grandfather's gun thing, it doesn't matter because that gun did not fire the bullet that killed this man. Period. That's one of the only things we know for sure. So let's see if we can try this again. So what you're seeing here, so we'll go back one. There's no blood here. Again, if close your eyes if you don't want to see this because it is disturbing for some people. But I think we got to look at these things to actually figure out what's going on. So he puts the mic down, or he picks it up, puts it down. Those are the two relevant frames, and we're lucky that we even have them. Now, we haven't had this. This is information that we haven't had before. So there's this idea that's floating around out there that his microphone exploded and released the bullet. But the microphone survives the impact. In my opinion, it is not the microphone. I never really bought that anyway, and I also, what we're seeing here is his whole neck swells out and balloons out. You're seeing the force of the impact, and I would allege you're seeing the cavitation. I think you can, now, Blake has a different idea. Something exploded underneath Charlie's t-shirt around the neckline. The effect of that explosion is what caused a laceration in his neck. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. To me, though, this looks like a shot fired from a higher angle. And it would make sense if there's enough body mass from the round, it could stop the round in his chest. And I don't want to get too graphic in detail, but if you've ever seen an artery severed, and the heart is still pumping, it's like this. Like you can actually see it. If you've ever shot a deer, and you strike it in the neck and you strike it a certain way or anywhere really, you can see that blood spurting because the heart is still pumping. It's still trying to live. We don't see that here. We do see an alarming amount of blood start coming out, but it kind of just, it's not spurting out. It's leaking at a high volume, which to me means, the way that I take it, especially now that I've seen this frame, the cavitation, the force of the round, look up cavitation if you want. I'm not going to do it for you. Look up what a 306 or a 30-06 or 5.56 or 7.62 NATO rounds. Look what they do to ballistics gel. They leave a great big hole inside the ballistics gel from the force of the impact. There's actually, if you slow it down enough, you can actually see like a, I don't know what the correct term is, but the bullet goes in and it expands, and then as it contracts, you actually get a bright flash of energy because there's so much energy and it's happening like in a fraction of a second. It's all happening. So if we didn't have these cameras, we wouldn't even know this stuff was going on, right? Like we studied this. Like the gun community pretty much knows everything there is to know about rounds, about grains, about guns. Everything's highly predictable. It's a set science. There isn't much else to learn. And I meant to talk. Sorry, I was going to talk about deflections. So a bullet with that much force, with that much power that's being fired, this notion that it could have just deflected off bone and went straight down into his body, or it could have deflected off bone and just stopped in his neck, or whatever this is. That's not how it works either. When you shoot ballistics gel or you shoot a target, that bullet stays on course. It'll deflect a little bit if it hits a hard object, but you got to shoot into a concrete wall if you're looking to stop the bullet, or you have to shoot something incredibly hard to make it deflect right away. A deflection is something deflects. Like you shoot through a branch, you shoot through a tree, the bullet is still going to try and keep going straight, but it's 100 yards down range, it's going to have veered off. It's not like it just bounces and goes straight down. Like the magic bullet theory of JFK. One of the reasons it's so implausible is bullets just don't do that. Basic ballistics, they don't do that. So anyway, gaze for Gaza? What is going on in the chat? Arteries do squirt blood, but you don't see that spurting. The artifact behind him is his necklace. Yeah, his necklace. He had a necklace. All I want to focus on is this swelling, this cavitation. There's a high-powered impact from somewhere. This isn't a credit card gun. You can throw that away. It didn't come from the lapel mic because the lapel mic survives the explosion. If it came from the lapel mic would have been blown up. So you have to explain what you're seeing here some way. And I think you can do it. I think you could actually put a shot from the left back into the equation if it comes from a high enough angle and it goes down into his body. Because I think his whole body, as a result of this, his heart, everything else is just destroyed. Like, he's dead instantly. The fact that he, if you watch the video, his hands go into what's known as the pugilist stance means that there was serious damage to his spinal column, his brain, everything. Like, he's, God bless, he's dead instantly. He didn't suffer. He probably wasn't even aware that he was shot. Whatever happened here. But this eliminates the idea of a low-impact round from some kind of credit card gun. I suppose it could be an explosive charge. My thinking is, and you're going to see it, I don't actually know if, I don't have it up here, but there was actually two people in the crowd that were pointing to a completely different rooftop off to his left. And with this frame, I said in a previous video how my feeling was the shot came from the right. Now that we have this data, you can put a shot from the left back on the table from a higher angle, and there is an appropriate roof line that could do that. And it just so happens there's two people, one guy in a cowboy hat and a red shirt, and then another guy in a red shirt, that are pointing at that roof right after the shot happened. You might want, the FBI might want to know what they were looking at. But another thing that's available on Blake's channel is, let's just, first, which one are we going to listen to first? Let's listen to this one.
I'm still about 15 out, but the 1-2 unit that's going to be up there to interview, as per FBI and FBI, we've been given clear direction not to interview, confirming negative interview until they get there.
140, we were not going to interview. We are just arriving now.
Copy that.
Building 151, this was relayed by Salt Lake. They're advising a complainant called 911, and he was stating there's an APB out on him for the shooting at UVU. He's now pinging at the Urban Pioneer Cafe at SMBB break.
I was just told that the FBI wants you to stand by there with him, and they're on their way to you.
So all you need to get out of that clip is that the FBI was extremely interested in maintaining total control of the so-called investigation. That's it. Don't let local law enforcement gather any information because that could screw up the narrative. That's what it looks like. Another thing, if this is accurate and real, I have no reason to believe at this point that it's not. Listen to this.
So I did do the request. They emailed me back. He did not go in for an autopsy. The death certificate was signed by the doctor at the hospital.
Oh, okay. Can you just do a field clip documenting that?
So that, what you heard, is dispatch audio saying that there was no autopsy. I thought there was. The story was that there was a very quick 5-minute autopsy where the coroner said, and this is going off of that TPUSA statement that they made, where they said that it was miraculous. He just had miracle bones, harder than steel. He's a man of steel. He's Superman. And in death, he stopped that bullet and stopped it from causing harm to other people. I'm not making that up. That's the official statement from Turning Point USA. It's kind of crazy. It's insulting to your intelligence. Miracle bullets to explain away ballistics. Miracle bones to explain away ballistics. But according to this dispatch audio, no autopsy was done. It was just signed off by the attending doctor. That defies Utah law. Again, if you go back to true crime reporting, like Explore With Us and other channels on YouTube, and specifically Utah law, any murder whatsoever requires a detailed autopsy. But that was skipped, according to this, in Kirk's case. Let's listen to one more.
Now we want to check in with Kate Gardner, who's live at the office of the medical examiner's office in Taylorsville, where we're told Kirk's body is being held.
Kate, talk to us about what happens after an incident like this.
Yeah, Matt and Alyssa. So immediately after the shooting, Charlie Kirk was taken to Timpanogos Regional Hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. Then last night, he was brought here to the state medical office here in Taylorsville. Now, this is because under Utah law, in homicide cases, the body must be brought to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy to determine the official cause of death. And unless there's a court order to keep the body, it needs to be released for funeral preparations within 24 hours of arrival. Now, typically, the person's family or the funeral home is responsible for picking the body up and transporting it, but as we've heard, it's going to be taken back on Air Force 2 to Phoenix. Now, the Utah Department of Public Safety Commissioner Bo Mason says he's been in touch with Kirk's wife, Erica.
He was transported to a local hospital where he later passed. Last night, his body was moved to the state office of the medical examiner. We will continue to facilitate movements to get him home today and with his family.
Basic procedural steps are skipped. That's it. Now, why would you do that? Why would you do that? I think we know. If they've got video of Tyler Robinson running across that rooftop, they've got video of him taking the shot. Why don't we have it? And there's some other weird things about the video that they showed us. If you watch it, and I'm not going to bother finding it because it would just take too much time, but if you watch the video that's been released, why would his shadow disappear? He's on a gravel stone rooftop, he's running, and his shadow is perfectly visible. He goes onto a white, highly reflective surface, and his shadow disappears. It could just be artifacts. This is speculative stuff because digital artifacts can do tricky things. But the whole thing, it's just weird. They've got footage of him taking the shot. Why don't we have it? They've apparently picked up these rounds, these bullets. We don't have the imagery of it. In any other investigation, you'd probably have that really quick. They release it to the public. They could release all this stuff to the public, but we don't have it. And there's the fact that Tyler Robinson does not have the rifle that they're claiming he has when he jumps off that rooftop. Now, the argument is that he had a screwdriver and he took apart the gun. It doesn't make any sense. Your nerves. You're in a high-profile political assassination. You just took a shot and murdered a man. And you're telling me you got the nerves of steel with a screwdriver. You're going to need more than a screwdriver, but with a screwdriver, you're going to take that apart. You're going to take the couple minutes it takes on that rooftop to take that apart and then stow it. It's the official story doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to check in with the chat and see what everybody's saying. Looks like it came out the back. In one captured frame, you can see Kirk's nipple. Yeah, there's no plate armor. Like that whole talking point of there being plate armor or body armor, I can't believe that it's still around and still going, and I still see it in my comments section and people linking videos from right after the shooting talking about how it obviously went off body armor. That's one of the only explanations early on that I could see to explain what it was I was looking at and what I was seeing, but there's no body armor. It's been confirmed 100 ways from Sunday. No body armor. So we have to explain what we see. Gary Bateman. Hey, Frank, when a bullet impacts a target, especially in a liquid medium like water or tissue, the phenomenon you're likely thinking of is hydrodynamic shock or temporary cavitation. For sure. Yeah, exactly. And it's a split second. Very violent, but there's a whole lot of violence that's packed into a very short amount of time, right? And with that footage that we just seen, we're lucky that we got one frame that actually captures that. It captures that cavitation. Now, some would say it's an explosion on his body. It's not necessarily that. The force of cavitation it's enormous. You're transferring all of that momentum from that bullet into that medium, into that body. So if the angle is right, he could have been shot from the left side, not from Tyler Robinson's perch. It's impossible because there's nothing in his neck to stop that 30-06 round, no matter how weak you make that round, even though the crack is high-powered rifle, even though you have that subsonic acoustic, not subsonic, the sonic acoustics. Like, we know it's a high powered rifle round. But if it's coming from Robinson's angle, there's nothing but soft tissue there. You could say, I guess, that it impacted one of his vertebrae. But even at that, if it impacted the vertebrae and it transferred that kinetic force to his vertebrae, the back of his head should have blown clean off. And it doesn't. The only thing that's there is soft tissue. And soft tissue, no matter how miraculous you think Charlie Kirk is, does not stop a round from a 30-06, even if it's a dialed down round. It doesn't have as much power. We're being lied to, but if the shot comes from a higher angle, like I said, there is an available roofline that could provide that higher angle, and you've got two people in the crowd pointing at that roofline on the left. I'm not saying that's where it came from. I'm saying there's people that clearly think something happened up there because they're pointing at it. If it comes from that angle, the round, which is probably not a 30-06 round, it's probably 5.56 or something else. It's some other kind of round. But it goes into center mass. It goes into his body through that left side and likely fragments and stops in there and does catastrophic damage. Even the talking point that he later died at the hospital, it's a fake talking point. He's dead instantly. And it's kind of funny, actually, how some of the official press conferences that I've watched, they talk about how he died later at the hospital. And yet, during that memorial service, we heard people say that he died instantly and he didn't suffer. There's you've got two narratives running counter to each other at the same time. And there's a complete lack of curiosity about the fact that those narratives cannot be true at the same time. And I don't think you should stop asking questions, because this is a big deal. This is Trump's FBI here. This is the Trump administration. This is his people. And if they're not racing to get to the bottom of it, then it's up to citizens. And there's a lot of good citizen journalists out there who are just trying to find the answers. And what's up with switching out the security team? Not using that security team since 2020, and now all of a sudden they're back, and they clearly, at the very least, failed in their mandate. Nothing bleeds out more than the neck. Doesn't matter if it's an entry or exit wound. That is true. Dude, the artifact behind him is his necklace. He does have a necklace on. It did break and it flew up, and that could explain some of the shirt movement too. But again, I think that the main point here is the cavitation. We now have a frame showing the enormous power that is being dissipated within, or I guess you could say, if you believe in the idea of an explosion out of the lapel mic doesn't make any sense, because it's the lapel mic survives. And if you've got an object and it's firing around, and the only thing that's securing that object is a thin little clip on the shirt, then that means the only thing that's going to backstop the force of that projectile is the shirt. So the lapel mic, at the very least, it should disintegrate. But if you accept the miracle, the lapel mic survives the shot, it should shoot back. It should pull the shirt with it as that round exits. And it doesn't do that. Not only does it survive, it moves across, I guess not across Charlie Kirk's body, but it moves in front. It moves in the opposite direction. So I think you can eliminate that as a source. And because there's so much power, because of that one frame of data, that one frame of what I think is cavitation, or I guess you could say an explosion, we know it's not some kind of credit card gun, because you see there's a lot of narratives running around out there, and I think you have to use the data to eliminate them. And now the other thing too is I was looking into this last night, and somebody messaged that Peak Prosperity, Chris Martinson, dropped a video on this subject, which I ended up watching this morning, and his thinking tracks mine almost exactly. And I really like Chris Martinson. I really like Peak Prosperity. When we were working on C19 before it was C19, his work, you know what? I don't want to say it that way. My work tracked his almost exactly. You could see that something was coming. We didn't know how deadly it could be, but it could have been very deadly. It looked at first like it was going to be a hell of a thing. But we did know, and this is one of my focuses, was that A, when the government and the WHO stops telling you that masks are dangerous and they flip their script, there's going to be a totalitarian crackdown. That was for sure. And your rights were going to get stomped all over, and that if they raced, which they did, through Project Warp Speed, which Trump enabled, people like to forget that, but Trump enabled Project Warp Speed, and without Warp Speed, we don't have a rushed, if you believe that's what it was, a rushed vaccination program. Without Warp Speed, there's none of that happens that quickly. And I remember I told my people, Martinson told his people, if you see something race to market, you should probably avoid it. And in retrospect, you know, that was solid reasoning, staying away from that. So anyway, you can check out his video too, because he goes over this in significant detail when it comes to ballistics, when it comes to ballistics gel, when it comes to different rounds, how they create cavitation, deflection. It's much more analytical in terms of what we know about bullets and how they work. So you could check that out. Deborah Summers says Mossad. You know, maybe. I can't make a conclusion about anything. I do think that there's a lot of circumstances that might point the finger that way, for sure. But without a thorough investigation, without names, without details about the security team, we can't render any conclusions. Like, the conclusion that I'm trying to stick with is that there's no way the round Tyler Robinson fired did that damage. There's no way that a 30-06 could do what we see from that angle, from any angle, really. The angle had to be from somewhere else, and I think it had to be a different caliber. I suppose it could be a 30-06 round fired from an appropriately high angle into the chest cavity, but I don't think so. I think 5.56 is a much more likely culprit. House says, I know. I tried to remind folks about the mRNA warp speed origin crickets. Yeah, people, you know what? Here's the thing, man. People want the hope. So do I. I mean, Trump versus Kamala, pretty easy. But I compared it to like a game of Russian roulette, where if you vote Kamala and you're playing with a revolver, you know that all 6 chambers are filled with bullets. But if you go with Trump, at least 3 of them are empty. You might still catch a bullet, but at least there was a chance. And I think it's very hard for people to abandon that hope, even in spite of evidence that things might not be what they seem. And even in the presence in current times of Trump's flip-flop when it comes to the Middle East, Trump's flip-flopping when it comes to Ukraine, in the face of that, people are just kind of turning the blinders on. There's some good stuff happening domestically, but then you also have this subject, this assassination, where it's Trump's FBI, it's Trump's Justice Department that prevented local law enforcement from doing their job because they wanted to come in and do a better job, and then they failed to do a better job. The crime site was never secured. It's been altered. It just screams cover-up, and it screams cover-up from within the FBI. It's disturbing information for a lot of people. Frank Vaughn, would you move to Alberta during transition period to become a citizen or stay in Sask for their movement? I'm not looking to move. I'm not looking to move from where I am. But I'm always going to do what's best for my children and what's going to give them the best shot. That's why I'm in Saskatchewan in the first place. And I thank God every single day for the opportunity to get out of Ontario for their sake. And if there's something better that I can do for them and their long-term prospects, that's the one thing that could get me to move from where I am. But I don't want to. I like it here. I like Saskatchewan. And I wish the politicians would wake up and realize that Ottawa is not our friend. They'll never be our friend. I knew that when I lived in Ontario. They've been holding the West back and treating them like a resource cow, like a cash cow, like a territory, like a colony, for the interests of Quebec and the Laurentian elites, since before we were even provinces here, since we were territories. And I don't know why every single premier of Saskatchewan, every single premier of Alberta has been a dedicated federalist. We've never even tried. Never even tried to talk about leaving, to see what we could get for a better deal. I hate it. Seeing Scott Moe and Mark Carney together shaking hands and glad-handing. It's like negotiating with an abusive partner, and it sucks. And I really hope events as they transpire, because we're only at the beginning of the reign of Mark Carney. I know some people think we're going to get an election soon. I'm not so sure about that. I think the pain is just getting ramped up. I think there's a lot of things I think. There's a lot of things I can speculate on. It's not going to get better for Western Canada. It's not going to get better for Canada, but people seem to love their suffering. And I think there's a very genuine, large amount of people who can't be shaken loose of their addiction to the Liberal Party. They love the abuse. They see what's happening to the country, and their conclusion is Pierre Poilievre would be worse. He's evil. It's one of the reasons Pierre is stronger than Scheer and stronger than O'Toole, but still kind of weak. Hasn't found his courage yet. He doesn't seem to understand that you're never going to get these people to vote for you. They turned against Trudeau himself, the person. They recognized that he was so toxic and so unbelievable that he had to go. But they didn't turn against the Liberal Party. They were more than willing to accept this man, Mark Carney, who hasn't lived here, who identifies as a European, a central banker. They were more than willing to accept the leadership of this guy in one of the fakest elections within a political party I've ever seen as a sufficient solution to Trudeau, that they all jumped back on board the Liberal train. I don't know if you can ever shake them off. They could have their houses seized from out underneath them, and I don't know if they'll ever start thinking. Which is why I've said for a long time that the best solution for Western Canada is greater autonomy and threatening to leave at the very least. But so far, the premiers don't have the courage to even try, in spite of the fact that Quebec has done such a great job blackmailing this country through threats of leaving. They've prospered so well for themselves through the sovereignty movement. I don't understand why the West wouldn't try it. It's a good model. It works within this federation. But they're just not brave enough to do it. Condor, 1970. It's obvious no one here hunts or has any idea of how a 30-06 varmint round behaves. Sure, we do. You can go on YouTube and you can actually watch a 30-06 varmint round and what it does to ballistics gel. I did it last night. It's still, like, you have to explain the did you just see the frame I showed you with the cavitation? The force? If it's not cavitation, you have to explain the sheer force that caused that response from Charlie's body. There's a lot of force being expelled there. So explain to me how you get that force. If the argument is it's just a lob, gentle bullet that just landed in his neck just so. Let's talk about y'all joining the United States. Charlie was killed by exploding nanobots by the Marlboro Man in the X-Files. Condor, you're just mocking. You're not thinking, man. You're just having a good time. And it's sad, because what you should want to do is get to the bottom of it and get the answers. I've just showed you how the FBI didn't even follow basic procedures. I've just showed you a frame that shows how much force was expelled into Kirk's body from one source or another, and this is your response? Clearly, you're not an honest player. I don't even think I've ever seen your name before. So you're just another one of those people that I've never seen before who has stupid opinions. Playing it safe, Poilievre needs to man up, says Peter from Edmonton. Yep. And I don't know if he's ever going to do it. PP needs to F off with the slogans and go hard. He plays it way too safe. Yeah, he's just got to go for it. They've never tried that. They've never tried that. Frank, it's not that people, conservatives, like pain. I think they are afraid of change. I don't think conservatives are the problem. I'm speaking of the liberal base. I'm speaking of the liberal base. I don't know what it's going to take to shake them free of the Liberal Party. Like, if you look at polling, they're still pretty much exactly where they were during the election. I suppose the NDP, which is about to have a leadership race, which could be fun. That could be fun. That could be a nice distraction, actually, something gentle, because it's kind of a clown show. They get a new leader. Maybe some of that support goes back. But if the NDP wants to rebuild the party, if they really do, first off, Jagmeet Singh has left them broke, in debt, in a really bad position. He reduced their role to simply rubber stamping whatever the Liberals wanted. He talked tough, and then he just got in line over and over again. He's so pathetic. Jagmeet Singh is worse than Justin Trudeau. He's so pathetic. He's so weak. He's so two-faced. Wearing his seersucker suits with his Rolex watch, pulling up to Parliament in the sports cars, talking about socialism, champagne socialist if you've ever seen one, literally reduced the NDP to a broken construct. Everything that Jack Layton worked so tirelessly to build, whether you like him or not, is lying in ruin. If the NDP wants to build a path back, they're going to have to do it by electing a leader who will fight the Liberal Party, who will vote against the Liberal Party, who will build a brand in opposition to the Liberals and the Conservatives and the Bloc. They'd have to find some strength. I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to do that, because the only thing they've got, the only thing they're clinging to now, is the balance of power. If they really want to rebuild their brand, they got to start opposing. I hope to see it. I hope to see it. But I still don't know if it's going to be enough to drag people away from the Liberal Party. Bruce Pardy suggests in his Constitution mock-up that citizenship is only gained through the transition period post-referendum, then only born in Alberta, or if a parent is a citizen. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Bruce Pardy has to say. I think that if Alberta and Saskatchewan truly want to leave, it's going to take... it's not going to be easy. Might need help. Because even with all the things I'm talking about, and that's something that we should keep track of. I'm saying that there's a problem in the Trump administration. Something's not right. There's a lot of change in direction. And even though the rhetoric is still good, maybe that bullet in Butler got his attention. Maybe the Kirk assassination was another warning that he took. I'm not trying to say that the Kirk assassination was directly a warning to him, but I mean as a knock-on effect. If you step too out of line, someone's going to shoot you. Like, they tried to get rid of Trump a couple different times. Now, maybe you can say that it was all fake, but maybe he took note. Maybe that's why he's changing in certain areas. Maybe he wants to get what he can get done domestically, and the price is not altering the foreign policy of the United States from what it was under Biden, which is essentially, it's two wings of the same bird. It's all a neocon agenda, which he seems to be shifting towards. But in spite of all of that, I still think that there are far worse outcomes than becoming states in the United States. I think it's a kingly offer. Skipping the whole territory phase and just jumping straight to statehood, if that's even still on the table, would be a kingly offer. But of course, he doesn't want all of Canada. He's only going to want certain pieces of it. And I think Alberta and Saskatchewan would do much better for themselves if they were under the Constitution. I think that that's an objective reality. Like, I don't think that takes a stretch of thinking to understand that this federation has not been good to the Western provinces. Would I prefer independence? For sure. I think it's a really good idea. But the thing that scares me the most is the status quo, as I've said numerous times. Why are we still calling this the Charlie Kirk assassination? Use his initials CJK. Sean Stone needs to make a movie in 2 to 3 decades. You mean The guy who directed Alexander, is that what you're talking about? I don't know what's going on there. If Alberta leaves, Canada will always be Liberal-led. Yep, you're right. That's one of the biggest arguments why we should leave. Because this pair of provinces constitutes, in my mind, a distinct society. Every bit as distinct as Quebec. Might not have a different language, but there's a completely different way of life. There's a completely different political culture. And it is getting drowned out by the policies of Ottawa. They're mass immigrating it out of us. So when you go to Calgary or you go to Edmonton and you see that it's becoming India, when you go to Saskatoon and you go to Regina and you see that it's becoming India, that's the result of federal policies, and that's the result of the premiers not having the courage to stand up to those federal policies. They talk a good game, but they're not willing to go the distance with it. I don't want to lose the distinctness that's here. It's the magnet that drew me here. I knew years ago that I'd be better suited to this place. And I'm so glad to finally be here. I don't want to see it get lost. The bored venomous trolls on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah, I mean they're out in force lately. Sean Stone is Oliver Stone's son. Oliver Stone. That's what I couldn't think of. He's also a director. All right, fair enough. I didn't know that. I didn't even know he had a kid. Do you like any Canadian black metal, Mr. Vaughn? Woods Ypres. They do acoustic stuff too. So there's a song called Shedding the Deadwood, great song. Summer's Envy, another really good song. Their lyrics are very deep. Woods was fronted by a guy by the name of David Gold. Was that his name? David Gold? Died tragically on Christmas Eve in Toronto in a car accident. But that's one that comes to mind. Woods of Ypres. Ypres, like the battle, like the World War I battle, the Woods of Ypres. The Donbass voted to leave as well. Look how that turned out. Yeah, they're fighting for their culture, they're fighting for their faith, and they're fighting for their language. People like to pretend that Ukraine wasn't trying to wipe all of those things out for at least 10 years before the Russians got involved. Romano involved in 1982 Constitution, Yuki and Atuki. Did he sell out the West? Well, it's interesting because, I've had this conversation before about how the NDP out here, specifically in Saskatchewan, used to be very different. It's one of the better forms of socialism that you could ever imagine because it was built around the rugged independence of the people. It was kind of like banding together because a lot of people were spread out over a lot of territory. So some good ideas came out of it for the times. And Romano was kind of the last of that. I know, I've actually had conversations with some NDPers here. And the only reason they're still NDPers now in Saskatchewan is because they think, or they feel, or their learned experience, their experience of living here is guided by what the NDP used to be. And they think, because if you look at Carla Beck, I don't know if she's actually a farm girl, but I'm going to call her a nice farm girl. She's soft-spoken. They see that, and they just see the old NDP underneath it. But unfortunately, the NDP in Saskatchewan is every bit as radical as the NDP at the federal level or anywhere, the NDP in Alberta. It's not the same Saskatchewan NDP or social credit that it used to be. You have an MLA in the legislature that's raising two healthy boys as girls. The radicalism's here. So I think there's a large chunk of the NDP base that doesn't realize it's not the same thing as it used to be during the Romano years, for instance. Can you play classical gas on your guitar? No, I can't. I'm not really a guitar player. I can play some chords. I default to power chords sometimes. I'm more of a singer and a songwriter than I am a guitar player. It's just the musical backdrop for whatever it is I'm singing. And I don't know, maybe I could learn how to play better, but I've never made the time for it. Jack Layton was when the NDP was good. I would change that to Jack Layton was when the NDP was honest, more authentic. Maybe honest is the wrong word. They were authentic. And I always believed that Jack Layton thought he was doing his best for the nation. This guy was a bit of a commie, but he was a commie for Canada. He wasn't an international commie. He wasn't your World Economic Forum type of commie. He was a different style. And even if you disagreed with him on policy, I couldn't doubt that he loved the country. And that's a big difference. That's a big difference. I lived throughout BC for 20 years back when it was really cool. BC is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. Up through Hope, BC. Standing up on the mountains, looking down on Chilliwack and looking towards Mission on a clear day is one of the most breathtaking sights I've ever seen in my life. It is just a beautiful place, and it is such a godless shame what's being done with it. Just terrible. BC is struggling under huge taxation. Well, yep. Government always needs more. Socialist government needs the most. And it's sad because it's such a beautiful, beautiful place. You want radical? Try the BC NDP for sure. If you want to see what communism breathes, read the Gulag Archipelago. Yep. I have the 3-volume set. I've got it in hardcover and I've got it in paperback somewhere up over there. Where did I put it? Doesn't matter. It's over there somewhere. And the crazy thing is that Canadian justice, if you can call it that, actually mimics a lot of what you read in I believe it's the first book. It might be the second book where they get into the revolutionary courts. Our court system is very politicized in Canada and has been for a long time. And I'm gonna cover that more in the research that I'm doing on triads and cartels and how far back this actually goes. And you're right, willful blindness, whoever said that, willful blindness is a great place to start. But then if you dig a little deeper, you'll find out the courts have been assisting criminal enterprise on a large scale for a long time. And you can get in trouble and you can have the book thrown at you and face years of imprisonment because you protest in favor of your civil rights and bodily autonomy. But if you go and stab somebody on the street, you can expect to be released on bail that same afternoon. There's a very distinct commonality between Canadian courts and the courts as they are laid out in the Gulag Archipelago. It's not as bad, and you might think it's hyperbole, but the underlying structure of justice in this country is every bit as revolutionary as what you read in Solzhenitsyn's book. Ebby is the creepiest politician currently. He looks sketchy. Like as a first impression, and you got to think he's been around for a long time. Like he's not new on the scene. His position as premier is new. But he was around. Was he not the Attorney General? If I've got the title right, wasn't that his role during the whole BC casino money laundering for Chinese triads thing? Like he's been around a long time, and miraculously he's survived, and now he's premier. Isn't that fantastic? BC's drug decriminalization is destroying this province. St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver has a safe injection site. They also have a rooftop garden where the addicts ingest and do deals. Yeah. The thing about drug decriminalization is there's a guy on Twitter, Guy Felicia or whatever he is. He's a former addict himself. He's cleaned himself up. He's become a family man. And there's a lot to his story that you could be proud of. But he's always on Twitter promoting these so-called safe injection sites, which are just drug dens, just places for people to use. Drug deals going down outside. People wandering around outside selling Dave's Dillies. I don't know if you've seen those videos, but it's like they get these drugs and then they sell them back to the community. People dying of overdose, getting Narcaned and brought back, and walking their asses straight to the dealer to get another fix. And we call this healthcare. That's what Guy does. He calls it healthcare. He calls it sane and good, and it's not. What I think it's actually doing is it's making it harder to spot illicit activity. Because if you make it legal for people to be zombies, if you make it legal for drugs to be everywhere and for users to be everywhere, it's harder and harder to spot the patterns of real cartel crime and the scale of it. And I think that's what drug decriminalization is all about at the end, is about making it easier to hide in plain sight. If everybody's addicted and they're all wandering the streets, it gets harder and harder to spot the illicit activity for police who are trying to do their jobs. And oftentimes police are doing their jobs. And it's actually the courts that are getting away with the letting criminals the courts are getting in the way of justice. They're getting in the way of policing's work. I feel really bad for cops. There's a lot of cops that I've talked to that are trying and struggling to do their jobs, and they don't have the backing of government or the courts. It's got to be extremely frustrating and soul-killing. I have a friend who works for Canada Post. She says most employees didn't want the strike. Yep, I was talking to a postmaster. I shouldn't say that. My wife was talking to a postmaster just yesterday, and it's the same thing. She didn't want this. And one of the things that I've heard coming out of post workers' mouths is that they actually believe that this is a concerted plan by Canada Post to so screw up service that it's going to justify them closing all of the rural offices and making people go into towns to pick up their mail. So like if you live in a really rural location, you're an hour and a half from town, all those little local post offices will close down, and you'll have to drive to some kind of hub to get it. As a cost-saving measure, they think that's what's going to happen. That could just be their fears, but there may be merit to that. There is a beautiful emerald lake south of Kelowna on the way to Princeton, surrounded by limestone cliffs. Beautiful. I need to get back to BC. I don't want to take the time off from what I'm doing, but I'd like to make that happen. I really wanted to do a drive this year, a few-day drive with the kids and the family and stuff, and it just never happened. Yeah, I want to get back there. The profit to build something takes years to realize. The profits to destroy something are immediate. So true. It's so easy to destroy and so hard to build. Frank, this goes back to Pierre Elliott Trudeau with the triads and Chinese government. Yeah, it does. And even when I was talking about earlier in the video about how they bringing in the charter actually made it a lot harder for police to disrupt criminal gangs. It actually set the stage for the disorder that we all face. I mean, you shouldn't feel like you're risking your life just to go buy groceries. But sadly, that's the case in so many cities in this country. I mean, even when I was driving out here, I can't remember if it was... It was for my move. It wasn't my brother's move. It was my move. We were in Thunder Bay, and we had to pull into the Walmart there, and were immediately harassed by drug addicts as soon as we pulled into the parking lot. They controlled the parking lot, and you had to dodge these people to get into the store. And the scary part, like a knock-on scary part, is that these people could be using in that store. So if they're busting up a fentanyl tab to snort it on top of a box of product in that store, and your child or you happen to go along and touch that with your hand, you could end up getting overdosed and killed. It's just, Walmart ain't cleaning it up. I talked about how my wife was harassed by somebody with a full cart of food, not even giving a sob story, just saying, you pay for cart, harassing her. Walmart's not cleaning that up. It's like they want it there. And you're not supposed to talk about it. What the government is doing to this country, this beautiful country. You think back to the 80s and 90s and how things were back then, and it's just squandered. And it's so sad. Frank Vaughn, how to prevent being black-pilled? Well, here's the antidote to being black-pilled. In spite of all the problems that we're talking about, it's still one of the best times in world history to ever be alive. We're not dealing with the Black Death. We're not dealing with the plague. So far, we're not dealing with total war. We're not dying at 30 years old anymore. We're not dying at 40 years old. We're actually living in one of the most peaceful centuries we've ever lived in on this planet. There's the ability to learn anything you want. You don't even need institutions of learning anymore to learn how to do things. Every piece of information, if you're a builder, if you're somebody who likes doing things, everything you need information-wise is at your fingertips and available for free. All you got to do is have an internet connection. So I guess your monthly fee for your internet is the expense. It's not all that bad. The problem is it's getting worse, and we could have such a higher state of civilization and a higher state of society if we still had a moral backdrop, we taught people morality, and we were very careful about who we let in. It could be so much better. And, I still see a future. I just think we're going to have to fight for it. I don't think it's all bad. I just don't like the direction things are heading. And it's kind of scary to see the Trump administration on the rocks like it is, doing some of the things that it said it wouldn't do, and then gaslighting us when we ask questions about it. There is a lot that sucks, but it's not all doom and gloom. I actually still think it's a very good time to be alive. It's a bit depressing at times, but I don't think I'm black-pilled yet. I am just stunned that there are still companies doing business with Canada Post, Peak Clan World. It's kind of crazy how much they charge. I feel sad. I was talking to somebody a while ago. I can't remember who. It was one of the viewers. It was either an email or it was a chat on Twitter. I can't remember. But they were a seller on eBay. And they said they had tens of thousands of articles of clothing in their inventory. And they couldn't afford to ship anything because they had to ship through Canada Post, and the shipping was as much or more as the item. And I know when I receive packages from back east for the kids and stuff, how much family is paying to ship that stuff here. Yeah. Asteroid Apophis is not coming here fast enough. I know it's not hitting Earth, but it will be close enough for satellites. Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't really want to get wiped out. I still see hope for the future. I'm not really at that whole ready to end it all phase. That being said, Frank, I can say things were definitely a lot better in the 70s and 80s. Growing up, coming of age, I should say, in the 90s was a great time to come of age. It was a little chaotic for sure, but there were no cell phones, there were no smartphones to record all your mistakes. And back then, you didn't have to worry about going to the grocery store and being accosted by people or getting stabbed. Like that, crime was better and more contained. Like it used to be a rule in the latter 1990s that if you were genuinely worried about violent crime, you could avoid 90% of it by just not getting involved in the black market. If you just stayed out of it, or if you had to be involved in the black market, pay your bills. Don't get in debt to anybody, and you'd be okay. Do those two things. It's not that way anymore. Crime is far more random. It's far more racial. You never used to have people on public transport smoking meth and shooting up. And now we're told we have to understand that and that they're victims. And some poor schmuck who's got to put their kids on the bus to get them to school because they got to go and work and be a tax slave, and then has to worry all day that their kids are going to come home alive. That never used to be a thing. Public transport especially in the smaller towns and the smaller cities, never used to be a dangerous thing. And now it is. People sitting in McDonald's because we're so browbeat. We're so held down. We're told that if we protest the vast scale of illegality that we're seeing, we're not being understanding enough, to the point where people are so indoctrinated, like I highlighted in a previous video. It was possible for somebody I know who works in social services to have a conversation with someone in their business who said that a guy who sexually abuses a minor, the person that had all the headlines, who did what they did to that 3-year-old, after they had done it to someone else, they ended up out of jail, and then they did it again. They broke in, poor kid sleeping in her own bed. This individual said, that person doesn't need incarceration. They need rehabilitation. They need understanding. They're victims too. Someone who should know better, someone who's in their 60s, who should have a better brain at that age, is saying that that person is redeemable. That's not Christian, folks. Unmitigated, unrestricted understanding for the most evil people on this planet is terrible. Terrible. Just got back from the States. Walmart in Idaho was all locals. Yeah, the United States is very different. Even if you see people from, and it depends on where you are. It does depend on where you are. The thing is that America has these problems too, but they're more localized. Canada, it's coast to coast. It's a strategic plan of the federal government. It wasn't bad enough that they were ruining the cities. They had to come up with a plan that took the people that were ruining the cities and then distributed them around all the small communities. They're sprinkling the destruction all over the country so that there is no single place that you can go from coast to coast where you're not going to see some element of it. And it sucks. And I wish the premiers had the courage to stand against it. Instead, they celebrate population growth, and instead they celebrate these things, and instead they negotiate with the abuser. They should be heading in a different direction. I remember my mother complaining about the emerging global economy in the 1970s and the rails being torn up for the grain trucks to ruin the already bad roads in Saskatchewan. The roads in Saskatchewan were infamous at one time. It's the one thing the Sask Party, one of the things that the Sask Party has done is build some of the best roads I've ever seen. As somebody from Ontario, the back roads in Saskatchewan are of such a high and superior quality to the back roads in Ontario. It's not even funny. With such a small, Saskatchewan has a vast amount of territory and a very small population base, and yet are able to grade all the roads fantastically all the time. I haven't really seen a bad road since I got here. Whereas in Ontario, not even 5 or 10 minutes north of the 401, you're going to run into terrible roads, in spite of the fact that there's way more money. That's one of the things I quite like about Saskatchewan is you can actually see your tax dollars at work. And there's so much attention to actual deliverable public services. So you have small towns, Humboldt, Tisdale, Melfort, Nipawin, all of these little small towns, Yorkton, all of these small centers. The facilities that they have for public parks for kids, it's incredible compared to Ontario. And that's not even just getting into the provincial parks where there's zip lines and there's all these fun things that you can do. But just the public parks and the splash pads and the internal pools and the arenas, and every small town's got an arena that you can go and skate in the wintertime. There's so much attention to stuff for families to do. I really admire it. And even they've even got a guy here as part of your property taxes that will come to your door, and if you're having rodent problems, if you're having gopher problems, or any kind of issue with wildlife, They got a truck full of traps and things to help you. That's just part of what you get for your property taxes. It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice to actually see it doing something rather than just burning holes. And oftentimes too, the township offices that I've seen, they're like little viceroy rooms or just these little holes in the wall. Where I lived in Ontario, Brighton, Ontario has this beautiful municipal building. There's a story that goes into that municipal building too. Brighton had a brand new dump, and it was a dump that could handle Brighton's capacity for garbage for 100 years. But then they made a deal to take Coburg's garbage, which is leading to a crisis because the dump is now full because it's taking too much garbage in. And for that access, they got a bag of money, and they used the bag of money to build a great, big, beautiful building for municipal offices to rest in. And that's kind of symbolic. Whereas here, oftentimes, a municipal building is just kind of a nondescript building where your tax dollars are going to because it's more focused on outputs. People from warm countries don't skate, Frank. Quality of roads is entirely because of the oil industry. Well, I mean, without the oil industry, there's no roads, period. I'm not going to argue about that. Ontario roads are by far the worst. Hands down, without question. Yeah, they're terrible. Absolutely terrible. Even when they tear up the asphalt and they go back to gravel, they just don't even know how to grade. Sask roads are horrible. I don't know where you are, Tim. Maybe they are where you are, but I've driven from the north all the way down to the south, and I haven't run into a single bad road. And whenever it does seem to get kind of bad, they just come along and grade it and fixed it. It's maybe your standard's higher. I don't know. I don't know what accounts for that disparity. Ontario is totally cooked. I'm afraid you're right. Sometimes people ask me what there is to do, and my advice is if you're of like mind, you should probably leave. Get somewhere else. Get out of Ontario while you still can, because I just don't think you can bring that one back. And I don't think part of it is the political will. I don't think there's any political will to bring it back. I mean, look at the margin that Doug Ford won the election by. Look at non-participation. Between apathy and voting for Fat Trudeau, mass immigration, which lands 500,000 people at the very minimum into Ontario every single year, applying more and more pressure to the housing market there. You asked me, the writing's on the wall. You know what's crazy? I went back when my brother moved out here, and I flew back to help him. This was a couple of years back. Get out here. We drove across the country. He drove out with me when we moved out, and I went back and returned the favor. And I was driving around. I didn't have much time, but on the way back from the airport, we drove through Oshawa, Ontario, downtown. Oshawa has always been a bad town. It was even a bad town in the 1980s. But it's so much worse now, and the nature of the crime has changed. You know, you got Tamil gangs, you got all these ethnic gangs running around killing each other. The roads are absolutely busy chaos. There's not enough infrastructure, and they're still just packing people in. But the thing that I noticed was the stores are starting to close. Even the chain stores. So, like, stores are the 24-hour convenience stores and the 24-hour fast food places, and maybe somebody in the chat, if they're from Oshawa, Ontario, can verify this, are starting to close down at night or close down altogether. Because either A, they can't find labor, or B, it's too unsafe to operate. Like, you're actually starting to see the lights turn out in spite of the fact there's so many people getting packed into the place. And I hate to say that because I love the land of Ontario. There's people back there I love very much. And it's not easy to pack up your stakes and move. But I think that's what you got to do. You got to make a plan for getting out, because I have very little faith that there's ever going to be political will to bring it back. Happily would I be proven wrong, but I'm not so sure about that. And there's still good spots in Ontario, don't get me wrong. But Toronto's everything, and Toronto is everywhere. You know, Toronto's in Elliott Lake. Toronto's in Bancroft now. Toronto is spreading its tentacles all across Ontario. It's up in Dryden. It's in North Bay. You know, like it's when they started taking their homeless and shipping them all across Ontario and setting up homeless camps in places that had never heard from them before. And again, people are shamed. They won't complain about it. Like they kowtow. They're afraid to speak about the damage that's being caused by the provincial and, in fairness, the municipal governments that are allowing it to happen. I don't know how you ever escape the dominance of Toronto. It's similar to, it's different, but it's similar to Manitoba's problem, which is that Winnipeg is everything. You know, there's a significant, I think it's something like 500,000 people, 600,000 people live in the rural areas, and then everything else is an adjunct of Winnipeg. So that city thinking is starting to dominate. And there's a certain element of willful blindness, to borrow the title from Sam Cooper's book. People just don't want to see the damage that's all around them. They don't want to see the evidence of their eyes. It's very disturbing. What a complete mess they made by promoting lazy workers. Not an inch, Frank? Not sure what that means. I left Ontario 14 years ago, just came back from Toronto. I'm glad I left years ago. Oshawa has always been a hellhole. It has. It really has. Ever since GM started downsizing. Maybe even before that, but that was before my time. I didn't see it. Good afternoon, Mr. Vaughn. Feeling rather violated. The other night, someone jumped my 8-foot fence with a knife and cut down my one Mary Jane I grew every summer. That sucks. That really sucks. You would think with such ready access to cheap weed, people would stop stealing each other's pot. How effed will Regina, Saskatoon be with another expected 500K boom incoming in the next 10 years? Terrible. It's already terrible. Like, and we came so close in the previous election to the NDP having a government. Like, the numbers of the popular vote totals don't tell the full story. The Sask Party drew 52%. And believe me, the Sask Party could be doing a lot more for this place. And the NDP, I think, was 40 or 41%. So it's a huge margin of victory. But if I recall correctly, and I did videos on the subject, if you only flip 2,000 votes in Moose Jaw and Prince Albert, you have an NDP government. And I'm scared that the writing's on the wall. And we might be okay now, but that the NDP might win the next one. That's a big concern that I have. And that will just open the floodgates wide open. And I don't know. It's not like the Sask Party's doing much to change the trajectory. We are still being victimized by Ottawa's policies, and the provincial government is allowing it to happen and even celebrating it. They constantly talk about population growth, and I get why. Saskatchewan was a shrinking province. The saying was 20 years ago, last person out, turn off the lights. I just read a whole book, actually, on the history of politics in Saskatchewan. It was written by somebody who was clearly an NDP supporter, and they never mentioned that that was a common saying once in the entire book of history, which I found very interesting. I genuinely wish the powers that are in power right now would do more and say more and get more active, because that's our best hope, is that they realize that Canada is a bad deal. And that's what I'm still advocating for. I know everybody wants a new political party. They want all these things. I'm not there yet. I'm hoping we figure it out and we can work through the existing institutions. And maybe that's just naive, or maybe that's just me trying to cling to hope, but a block from Parliament, total dump, smells like poo, never used to be. I think you're talking about Queen's Park, man. It used to be one of the most beautiful places. Toronto used to be a beautiful city. I mean, it still kind of is. The trees and some of the architecture is still beautiful, but underneath all that is a drug problem, demographic problems. Oshawa is dangerous, no thanks. That is an understatement. That is an understatement. I was actually on a phone conversation with somebody. They weren't in Oshawa, they were in Bowmanville. And as I was talking to them on the phone, gunfire broke out in the background. That never used to be a thing. That never used to be a thing. And those people just bought a home and paid hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to live in that. And it was another conversation I had with somebody, you know, they're complaining about everything. It's like, why are you buying a house then? Why don't you get out? And, you know, you can almost see the eyes glaze over at the concept of change, because change is hard for people. You kind of get addicted to what you know. I live in a somewhat isolated city in BC, and we still have huge immigrant influx, drugs and rampant crime way up. Had to fence my house in and upgrade cameras and security. Yeah, doesn't that suck? Doesn't that suck? Why do we need that? Has anybody made a good, compelling argument as to why we need that? Why we need mass immigration? Why we need to displace Canadians from their jobs and just fill a bunch and turn the place into India? Like, you never voted for it. You never got your say. We could stabilize the population at a lower level. There's nothing wrong. We're going to have a declining population without mass immigration. That's for sure. Now, we could stabilize the population at 40 million, or as attrition takes its toll and the baby boomers die off, we can lower the population down to 35 million or 30 million. You can pick your point. You can stabilize there. You can still have an immigration system that brings people in that we need, that want to become Canadian. Instead, what we got is we talk about the TFW program, but we have this other program, the IMP, that doesn't even have to do a labor market assessment. And we're just flooding the place with low skill, low IQ people who have no concept of what it means to be Canadian. And they're just pouring in. It's deliberate destruction in the name of multiculturalism and diversity. And you know, you can still have diversity. You can still have multiculturalism. You can still do all the flowery, fairy things. But that's not what we're doing. It's not what we're doing. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, this is something I wanted to get to, says that if the egregious spending doesn't stop, Canada will economically collapse in 12 to 18 months. And it's true. I want to cover that in its own video. The thing is, it's like I could probably do a show every single day that would be 3 or 4 hours long. Not like this, like a planned show. This is just an impromptu conversation today. But I wonder what the utility would be. You know, like it seems that a 20, 30-minute video is... How much time do people actually have for watching content? So, like, one of the things I struggle with every single time I'm planning a video, like, it's a daily process. What am I going to say today? Is trying to figure out how to say it quick. I don't pretend that I'm good at that. I try to be. But it's like everybody only has so much time and attention span, and there's a lot of voices out there. And you're also competing with compelling, hopeful narratives. Like there's popular narratives, and I don't do popular narratives. You know, I'm just trying to drive at the truth. And a lot of the things, and I'm not trying to be the arbiter of truth. I'm not trying to say I've captured it. I'm driving towards it. That's my objective, is to find it and try and talk about it. But what you find, there's a saying that if you speak the truth, I would change it to, if you seek the truth, have one foot in the stirrup, because, man, your friends are your enemies by the next day, because you're not towing a party line. You're not towing a narrative line. If you want to get famous, it's real easy. Pick a political party and back them, no matter what they do. And people will tune into that because they want to hear what they want to hear. People are addicted to their confirmation bias. They want to hear what they want to hear. And apparently I'm doing something different. Frank Vaughn, did you see Darshan Maharaj's commentary on M44? No, I'm going to copy that right now. I'm going to pop that into a tab. We're not even going to look at the search result. We'll just come back to that later. I'll check it out, man. There are recent videos on the PBO's comments, but he's referring to collapse of our dollar and our credit rating. For sure. It's multifaceted. I think Carney's here to oversee that collapse. I've been saying that since before he was leader of the party. As soon as he appeared on the team, or on the scene, I thought this guy's here to manage our decline. That's what it's all about. He's going to manage the parceling out of Canada. He's going to get incredibly rich doing it. His friends are going to do very well doing it. The sheep in Ontario and Quebec are going to applaud the entire time and think they're saving the country. And just like always, they tell you they're investing in Canada and they tell you they're going to save the country, but what they're really here to do is finish its destruction. But it's a matter of who gets the pieces, who reaps the benefits from the destruction of this nation. That's kind of what the fight's over right now in my mind. There's competitors, China, the EU, and the United States. And if the whole thing's going to fail anyway, and the pieces are just going to get bought up and taken by other nations, which nation do you want to throw your lot in with? And I'm for the United States all day. Even if it comes to another, because people have said, yeah, but what happens when Trump's out of office? As if it's about Trump. It's not about Trump. It's about the Constitution. It's about what they have that's better than what we have, regardless of who's president. And I've been critical of Donald Trump on many things. It doesn't matter who's president. It's if you're going to lose your country anyway, which we already did, we lost it in 1982. People don't realize that. There's a lot of people out there who are just call me a traitor for giving up on Canada. It's like, you don't even know that your country's already been replaced. There's people online, they virtue signal about my father and my family or my grandfather fought in the Second World War, and I'm not going to let it come to our dissolution. It's like the country they fought for is gone. It disappeared in 82. And nobody even voted for it. There was no referendum asking Canada what they wanted. If they had had a referendum, we probably wouldn't have had the new country. So the country's already gone. The one that you're trying to defend disappeared 43 years ago. But people don't even know that, man. So if the country's going to get dissolved and it's going to get carved up, where's the best place to be as a human being in the matrix of options? And my argument is the United States. Stop the climate scam, for sure. I miss your long shows. Most others that I watch are 1 hour long, a few short ones. Yeah, I don't know what the best approach is, actually. It's kind of been the... First off, I didn't even know if when I decided to start taking this seriously again back in January, I didn't even know if the audience would still be there or if there would be an audience for what we're doing. And I think over the last intervening 9 months, I think we've more than proven that there's validity to the channel and validity to the approach. And so what's been on my mind for the last little while is, what does the next year look like? Where are we trying to head to? What is it exactly we're all trying to do here through me? So, I think there's a streaming component. I think there's an option for more interviews. But again, you come up against the challenge of people only have so much time. So I haven't really arrived at any firm answers yet as to how we're going to build this thing forward. But I don't think I'm going to be making any changes. There's been a lot of pressure to monetize and do some stuff, and it's good advice, it's sound advice, but I think there's enough of a following now that is here because they like the approach, that if I went down a different path, I'd be kind of abandoning those people and abandoning the philosophy. And I hate advertising. I just hate it. I go and I try to watch. When my ad blockers break and I am forced to sit through an ad on YouTube, it drives me nuts. So why would I punish my audience by making them sit through ads? If we can make this thing work donation only and it's enough to pay for my time, then that's what we're going to do. And, we'll keep doing it. Definitely going to keep doing it. Be right back. Daughter's calling. Good. Should always answer the phone for the daughter. Maybe the 51st thing was because, do you really think the U.S. intel did not know what was going on in Canada? I'm sure they do. I know U.S. intelligence knows what Canada has become. This cartel crime-ridden haven. Because you can read the reports that come out of the U.S. government going back 30 years. I've highlighted only a fraction of the available information on my shows before, where I did a whole series of shows talking about cartels and crime in Canada and the scale of money laundering and terrorist financing and everything else. The Americans know. And I think it's crazy. Trump comes out and highlights a fentanyl problem and a human trafficking problem and a terrorist apprehension problem from Canada. Only scratches the surface. Just like the Tylenol thing, the media and a lot of the people come out and just decry it as fake news. But before Trump came along, Canada was recognized internationally as a criminal hub. This is real stuff. And there are people who deny that real stuff. And with the Tylenol thing, I covered it recently, but my wife and I knew in 2019 and 2021 that we should avoid taking painkillers in the womb. We actually had a doctor. I can't remember which child it was. I think it was the first one. It was the first one. My wife, unfortunately, had a kidney stone at the same time as she was 6 to 7 months pregnant. And so we went to the ER because she's having pain, and she's having pain in that region. She thought it was a kidney stone kind of feel because she'd had one before, but she wasn't sure. And so we go to the ER and we sit and we wait our turn. And the attending doctor comes in, Canadian guy. And, he basically explains that, he thinks it's a kidney stone. And that if the pain gets worse and it becomes intolerable, that she should take a painkiller. Do you know what he prescribes her? Morphine. He told her to avoid both Advil, or ibuprofen, rather, its clinical name, and acetaminophen. And he said, take morphine, very low dose, because it's the safest thing, and only take it temporarily. And he prescribed her something like 10 tablets. Now, we never got it. She never took it. But that was what they said. Avoid the acetaminophen. Tylenol themselves has put out posts, as you've seen, saying to avoid it during pregnancy. They don't recommend it being used during pregnancy. Now, I have had, during one of the pregnancies, I was present for one of the meetings with the midwives, and the midwives recommended the use of acetaminophen. But again, limited. But the warnings have been out there. The science has been out there. This isn't some kind of conspiracy theory. Trump didn't invent it. But it's kind of crazy, right? Like, we see Trump deviating course on some of his foreign policy, but at the same time, Trump derangement syndrome is such a useful psychosis. It's so useful. If he came out and said it was dangerous to drink bleach, there'd be videos appearing on TikTok of people drinking bleach. I'm sure of it. It's insane. Seems by design and everyone is complicit. It does seem by design. It does. It seems like a plan. I don't think incompetence explains what we're surrounded by. That's called Brave browser. No ads on YouTube. You're right. I should switch to Brave. I use Firefox with add-ons. If you guys can't tell from looking at the browser when I put it on screen, I'm still stuck on Firefox. Maybe I should go to Brave. You guys use Brave? You like Brave? I also got to get a mic stand because the audio when I'm tapping on the microphone is driving everybody nuts. So I'm going to fix that. I'm probably going to build it out of like 2x2 or something. I'm going to do something custom. I'm not going to buy some stand. I'll look into it. Brave works well. Brave is better. LibreWolf is the secure version of Firefox. Firefox can help you with your constipation issues and browse the internet securely. Firefox. LibreWolf is a secure version of Firefox. Okay, we're going to pop that into a browser window, and I'll check it out when the stream is done. Never heard of Brave. Yeah, it's basically Chrome, but it's retooled to be pro-privacy and to block ads. And I actually think they have their own crypto token, BAT token, from what I remember. And you can opt to get paid for being served ads. At least that's the way it used to be. I did use it for a little while years ago, but I ended up going back to Firefox. I have no idea what's going on. I'm scrolling up icebergs, minefields of ice, not just one Titanic. I have no clue. I've completely lost the script in my own chat. PP, NATO, bag liquor, Carney, bigger bag liquor. They're all going to lick bag. It's just a matter of how much. Like, man, when I ran for election in 2019 and I went to the debates, it was really crazy, like actually being part of that. And hearing, like, you know, over the course of this series of debates, you're probably fielding 100 questions. Some of them will be very similar. Some of them are very different. But listening to the other four people on the stage answer, it was like a person saying, I'm going to drive in first gear. I'm going to drive in second gear. I'm going to drive in third gear. And I'm going to drive in fourth gear. We're all going to be driving the same car. We're all going to have the same transmission. And I was the only one saying, we need a different car. Like, why are we stuck driving this crappy car when we could get into something really cool and better and more fuel efficient? Like, I was the only one talking about choice. The rest of them were all saying the same thing. The NDP, the Greens, the Liberals, and the Conservatives were all saying variations of the same thing. It was just a matter of the extremes of those same things. And it was really something to be a part of. And the fact that the audience in each of those events was so ready to hear something different that, like, even when I went to that environmental debate and I spent the whole time poo-pooing climate change, I was getting applause all over the place. And I couldn't believe it. And neither could my opponents, because I was saying something different and the audience was ready to hear that. They, the environmentalists, the biologists, the people that were in that crowd that actually cared about the environment, genuinely believed that CO2 was getting too much attention. And they'd never heard anybody say that before. And it resonated in a David Suzuki-funded forum. And I'll never forget, that was a very educational experience. People would love choice. They're just not given choice. Frank, you need to use Brave browser to get rid of YouTube ads. I got an add-on. It generally works, but it breaks sometimes. I think that YouTube is always pushing updates to foil the add-ons. Yeah, maybe I should check out Brave. For sure. Antifa Community Irving. Oh, share with me your wisdom, Antifa community, please. Please type in the chat. I want to read whatever it is you have to say. And do it quick. I don't have a lot of patience. Tell me how to make the world a better place from your perspective. You've said impeach Trump. Okay. Impeach Trump. What else you got? Come on, Antifa. Let's do this. If camping is actually simulating poverty, does Canadians living in the woods equal success? Yes, eating squirrels is the ultimate sign of equality. Genghis Tron, have you seen the footage supporting the palm gun theory regarding Kirk? I don't buy it because there's too much energy displayed. Like, there's too much energy involved in the shot, or you know, whatever your chosen thing. But you have to explain the amount of energy, and a palm gun doesn't do it. A palm gun cannot create that kind of energetic reaction, which I think is cavitation. I've seen limited things. I haven't gone deep on it. But I think I think, when was that footage released? The footage with that still. Yeah, it's only yesterday he published the full video with that cavitation frame in it, which we're lucky to have. So I don't know if it's disseminated widely yet, but it's kind of the ultimate piece of energetic evidence. You have to explain all the energy that you're seeing contorting and puffing out Kirk's body. There's a lot of energy there, and I think that energy has to come from a rifle round, maybe an explosive, but I think a rifle round shot down and into the body actually explains what you're seeing, whether it comes from the right or the left. I don't know, because we're all trying to piece things together without any official help. And I don't think you can get that kind of energy from a palm. You can't get that kind of energy from a palm gun. But, I'll check it out, man. I'll check it out. It's not about, I don't think it's about, telling each other what's right and what's wrong and one theory being our pet theory, and that has to be the theory. Like it's an investigation. It should just be an open conversation. Although I do believe that the energy that displayed in that video pretty much eliminates a palm gun, because the recoil from that kind of energy firing around in a palm might take your hand off. Exploding wireless mics makes sense after the pager attacks. Now, in theory it does, man. In theory it does, except the mic survives the explosion. And there's a lot of energy. And the mic, it's only clipped to his shirt. So, like, if it exploded with that much force, the mic should shoot back from the point of the explosion. And it doesn't do that at all. It doesn't do that at all. And it actually survives the explosion. So, to me, you have to eliminate the mic as the source of the kinetic energy, because it survives. Like, physics has to be obeyed, in my mind. It was a heavy bullet with light powder from a high-power rifle. That's a good explanation, but the problem is, again, Gary, if you roll back and you watch the video and the frames that I paused, the visible cavitation, the energetic deformation that you see on Kirk's body does not support the idea that this was some kind of lob round, a nice light weight. It doesn't support that. The theory has to fit with the visible energy that is dispersed in his body. And there's a lot of it. And even a low velocity round from a 306 would do, a 30-06 would do a hell of a lot more damage. If you want to go deep on that, you can watch Chris Martinson Peak Prosperity's video, because he focuses on the ballistics and the physics of it, like in depth. It's like an hour-long video. Easy to watch at 1.5 times speed. His heart wasn't beating. Smitty, correct. Cavitation destroyed his heart. That's my guess at this point. The chest cavity was just devastated by the energy of the round. Like, he was dead instantly. So this idea that he died at the hospital later, that's just, I think, another narrative, another piece of the narrative that covers up what actually happened. I'm sure you know, Smitty, if you've seen how blood squirts even out of a deer when the heart is still beating. Very different look. Very different look. 5.56 or 300 blackout. I don't know. Were you around, Smitty, for there was a video that was purchased and dropped yesterday. We know the source camera. We know the video is legit, and it actually captures a frame of the cavitation and the deformation of the body, like how he expands, all around his chest and his neck. The whole thing expands. So, like in the clips that we've seen before, it kind of looked like it was just one side of his neck, but this shows, and that if you actually want to see the entire process, you would have to have a camera that's shooting 10,000 frames per second. We don't have that here. What we have is 30 frame per second high definition cameras and cell phones. But this camera captures a frame that just shows the whole expansion, and leads me to believe, and maybe you would have an opinion to know better, but leads me to believe that the round went into center mass down from a higher angle and created this massive cavitation that, like you just observed, destroyed his heart mid-beat. Back a bit, I seen we would need to hunt, fish, and forage, Dan says, for food by 2040. But there will be no guns, so back to bows and snare traps. Well, you didn't say snare traps, but that's where my mind went. Yeah, kind of crazy. And that was a government report. That wasn't some random thing that was put out by somebody. That was the government itself saying subsistence living, people eating squirrels, if we can't continue on this trajectory. And the Canadian public was like, just shrugged it off like it was nothing. Re-elected these guys. Because I think, if I recall correctly, that came out before the election. How does anyone here know anything about what CK's heart was doing? The so-called authorities can tell you anything, and they will. Both of those things are true. The thing is, in the lack of a thorough investigation, GMW, citizens and people who care about truth are just left to analyze what bits of data that we get. And we got a pretty big piece of data yesterday on the 26th from Blake Bednar's, which I showed earlier. If you type Blake Bednar's into Twitter and you go to his account and review some of the stuff that he's put up, he paid his own money to secure this original footage. And we're lucky we got a frame that gave us some new data about the nature of this impact and how much energy was involved. So we're all just left to ponder the bits of data that we can gather. And we should, because the official story is absolute bollocks. Wouldn't the canopy over the stage limit the opportunity for a high-angle shot? Not necessarily. Most of the roof lines had a good vantage on Kirk. I don't have it to pull up, but this has all been analyzed already. There's plenty of angles that you can get into center mass from both the left and the right. It is crazy that they ban all these guns, but not the SKS, an actual military gun. Now, you're right. Do you know why the SKS is not getting banned? It's because of the natives, because they have a lot of them. And they don't want to ban them because it would offend the First Nations. That's what it's all about. That's why the SKS stays. It's crazy. If they were actually committed to getting rid of what they call military style or assault style weapons, the one gun that was actually used by militaries, because the AR-15 is not used in military service, the SKS was. And, luckily for SKS owners, they're still legal. It's a great hunting rifle. Diablo Mix, Frank, why Charlie? Why would he be the sacrificial lamb, theory-wise? Because he, and I don't know about his organization, but him personally, I don't think he was blackmailable. I don't think they had any dirt on him. I don't think they could buy him. He lost millions of dollars for allowing Tucker Carlson to speak at TPUSA, and he was going to invite him back again. There was enormous pressure because he was in the week prior to him getting shot. He was I would say a couple of weeks prior to him getting shot. He was really starting to talk about what Israel's doing in Gaza, and funding was getting pulled, and there was a lot of pressure on him to abandoned some of his talking points, and he wasn't going to give, and he couldn't be Epstein. He couldn't be blackmailed by a honeypot. The guy was too steady. The real reason, like these are all kind of actually superficial reasons, he had the future in his hands, and he was changing the future because youth, young people, Gen Z, and the upcoming Alpha generation were listening to him. He was going to the universities. You have to understand, universities are indoctrination factories. They're about shaping the future and shaping how people think about the future and changing the way the future unfolds. You have to get the youth, and you have to indoctrinate them. Every nation, every government in the world has always understood this, from Hitler to our own government, that the youth is the most important. In 1945, when all was lost, the most ideologically motivated Germans that were left were the young. When everybody else stopped returning the Sieg Heil, the salute, the young, more often than not, were still doing it because he understood. As any bad actor understands, you have to indoctrinate the youth. The universities are indoctrination factories. So Kirk was going to those universities, and he was changing things. He was shifting Gen Z, and he was going to shift Gen Alpha. And there's nothing more powerful than shifting young minds. And that's what made him dangerous to a lot of people. And everybody wants to talk about Israel, but there's also Ukraine. The fact that he was very much wanting to get America out of involvement with Ukraine. That's another huge money pipeline that he was interfering with. Establishment politics that he was interfering with. There's a lot of recruitment. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a lot of recruitment that happens on university campuses that ends up channeling people to be volunteers in that conflict. Like there's so many ways that his work was screwing with the neocon or the establishment narrative. So there's a whole pile of people who may have been inclined towards stopping that damage from being done. Kirk was dangerous because the young listened to him. More than any other conservative influencer, Charlie had the youth in his hands, and that's what made him so dangerous. Peter says, heard SKS might hit the ban list. It's becoming, it's getting attention in the media for sure, that it's not there. And maybe it'll be one of the last editions, simply because of it's a hot button political issue. It definitely hits natives harder, as if they're going to turn in their guns, man. Does anybody remember Oka? I was young for it, but I remember Oka, and I remember how they were more than capable of busting out AK-47s, and if I remember correctly, I believe there was AK-47s on the native line, behind the native line. I don't know if anybody ever went to. I would have to refresh my memory, but they seem to have plenty of prohibited guns at that stage of the game. They're not going to hand over their firearms. There will be next to no compliance. So they can ban it or they don't ban it. There will not be compliance from the First Nations. Chopper 5 shows footage after shooting from the air. Can't have diversity without division. I mean, diversity is division, right? That's what diversity is. Even if you look at a rainbow, look at the rainbow flag. All the colors are different. It looks like a great big vomited mess that came out of your printer because it's trying to create this notion that division can be unity. It's like Orwellian doublespeak. Diversity is division. It is not unity. The gun ban is about Quebec voters. It's about a few things. It's certainly about Quebec voters. The natives had full auto weapons. Yeah, that's my recollection too. That's my recollection. They were ready, and they probably still have those weapons to this day. LMFAO, I got to get my son popcorn and see Antifa Community Irvine is here. Save us all, Antifa. What happened to them? I thought that we were going to have a conversation. I thought we were going to have a conversation with Antifa. You know, I want them represented too. How could they not have a drone providing Overwatch is a massive security failure, especially after the attempted Trump shootings? Like, drones are cheap, right? You got a whole security team. You got security in the crowd. You got security surrounding the stage. You got security everywhere. You have some cops in the crowd, not a lot, but you have some police there. Nobody was watching the roofline. You didn't want to fly an inexpensive drone to actually see what was going on. These aren't accidents. These are deliberate failures. To my mind, anyway. Chris Martinson is okay. He's been screaming peak oil for 20 years, but anyway. Well, I think actually when I was scrolling through, because I haven't watched many of his videos lately, but I was seeing that peak oil comes to the United States was one of the thumbnails I haven't watched. That's an interesting one because you're right. For 25 years, we've been told it's here. And the lights are still on. And last I checked, I think gas in Saskatchewan is $1.36 or $1.40 a liter. And if you go to Alberta, it's $1.26 even after inflation. So that doesn't exactly scream supply shortage to me. Not yet, anyway. I see somebody saying GMW, if Charlie Kirk is actually dead, he's dead. I don't know how you fake that. I don't know how you fake cavitation. The pugilistic stance that he adopts after being shot is instant. Like it's instant. Yeah, he's dead. In Canada, the indoctrination starts in elementary school. Yep, they're going earlier and earlier and earlier. They're trying to sexualize your kids earlier and earlier and earlier. They educate them in ways, telling them they do public school exercises, trying to indoctrinate them into this concept of white guilt. They create division. And it's always... There's a saying, you know, and it's not always true, but the saying is, if you can, do. If you can't, teach. And there's a whole lot of can't. There's a whole lot of people with a lot of personal problems that are in the teaching profession. And they're projecting onto the children an ideology or a belief system that is compensating for their own lack of self-work, self-awareness, self-responsibility. I thoroughly believe that public schools are just toxic waste at this stage. It doesn't have to be that way, but sending all love and people to Sask and Alberta. You're sending all the people and all the love to Sask and Alberta. You might want to check with us first. We might not want all the people. The LGBT HD TV flag looks like an error picture you get on TV. It's true. Drag queen story hours in public libraries, and then people tell you that that's not about sexualization. Like what is it about then? I mean, what is it about then? What's that entire culture about? And again, that's here in Saskatchewan too. And there are MLAs who are happy to take their children to those events down in Regina. So the NDP in Saskatchewan is not the NDP that it was 30 years ago. I had the privilege of training young folk how to play safely outside. Proud I am. You should be. That is noble work. You hear about the vehicle burning by Unity? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Remember Photo Soldier nose to nose with Warrior? Yes, I do. What an iconic picture. We came very close on that one to something really messy. Really close. $1.13 at Reserve in Northern Ontario. Really? Man, that is cheap for Ontario. Everybody used to get their gas up in Roseneath where I lived. Gas and cigarettes. Cigarettes. Yeah. Yeah, who would ever thought? Arnold Schmidt says regular gas is $1.15 in Western Alberta. Diesel is $1.29. Who would have ever thought, from the perspective of 20, 25 years ago, that diesel would be more expensive than gas? And here we are. I remember when heating your house with stove oil was the cheap option. Yard Prep says dirts. Yep, dirts. Got to get your dirts. You just gotta go up to the Reserve and get your dirts. Gonna get a cheap gas. Now I'm gonna be back up. Woohoo! It's the weekend. Gonna have some beers and smoke some dirts. Leanne Larson, best 2 hours I've spent for a long time. I'm glad you think so. We're not a huge community, but we're a good community, I think. I don't think we ever want the numbers, you know. We just want to have a good group. Diesel is chlored stove oil? Chlored? What's chlored? Message retracted. Jack B apparently wasn't satisfied with his own spelling. Diesel keeps forever. It truly does. It keeps really well. Free school and cheap gas. Living the dream. Does anyone have their firewood ready? I've got some. I got some ready. I don't have enough that if I had to survive a winter that I would be sufficiently stocked up. So I should probably just get on that. Just let Frank be Frank and all is well. That's the only thing I know how to do. Sometimes people, Claws of the Panda, that's a great book. Sometimes, you know, you almost gather the thought. It's like, I hear people say, I wish I could just forget what I know, or I wish I could just turn my mind off, or I could just be a liar, or I wasn't a moral person, or anything like that. And I get the frustration, but I could never be anything except exactly what I am. And I'm not perfect, but I couldn't do it. You know, I might get some things wrong, but I'm gonna come by it naturally. I have a really hard time being contrived. You know, I can be polite. I can change how I speak. I would probably swear a lot more if I was fully liberated doing this, because I've always liked swearing, but I don't. You know, I engage some self-control, but like self-control and changing who I am and what I say are two different things. I don't think I could. I too much work. No more fines for walking in the woods. Now you can collect firewood too. Yeah, just make sure you collect the right kind of firewood, or there might still be fines. Can only be dead wood. People don't understand winter until they experience the Saskatchewan winter. Buddy, I love the winters here. I love the winters here. I used to fear these things when I lived in Ontario. And now that I'm here, they're fantastic. Yes, they can get cold sometimes. They definitely can get cold. Minus 40 is a thing, but the whole thing is not minus 40. You know, that's the exception. That's not the norm. Minus 20, minus 25 at night, that's pretty normal stuff. But winter is winter here. When winter sets in, it stays. There's no such, now I'm going to say this. I'm going to say there's no such thing as a January thaw. We had a little micro thaw last January. A little micro one. The snow didn't disappear. You don't have a freeze thaw cycle. You don't go from snow to mud to skating rink to snow to mud to skating rink 15 times in a winter. Winter comes, it stays, and then April shows up and it breaks sometime in April. And then it breaks and it's gone. And it's fantastic. You're not tracking mud inside your house. Everything's clean. It's awesome. I think the winters are fantastic. Like love them. Frank wrote a script for Inspector Gadget. You got played by his love for furry mad cow. I loved Inspector Gadget when I was a kid. And my cat kind of looks like Mad Cat. Not as fat, but kind of looks like Mad Cat. I missed an opportunity to name my cat Mad Cat. I'm just realizing that now. Just yesterday, I dug out a truckload of 2x6 from work. 8 and 10 footers in the garbage, nails in it, whatever. Yeah, man, clean that stuff up. Either burn it or use it. Shirley McLean says, you are a distraction. My husband is too busy watching you and isn't getting any chores done. He loves your show. I don't know what to do for you, Shirley. I don't want to get in the middle of anybody's domestic situation. But I'm kind of with your husband here. And what are you doing here? Maybe you're watching too. Maybe you're projecting. I don't know. The darkness of winter does suck, though. Peter, man, that is something. In December, when the sun is barely above the horizon and it's dark by 4 o'clock, it's not too bad, though. It's not as bad as I imagined it would be, because it seems to me that dusk and dawn are a little bit extended and not quite as cut and dry in December. So you get a little bit of sky lightning that I wasn't really counting on much of that, but it seems to me that it's not too bad, but it is a long dark. It is a long dark. I'm from Thunder Bay. It's all about dressing for it, for sure. I love that phrase. It's a dry cold. It's still cold. That dry cold will kill you. It's funny living in a place where I've had to gather a lot more respect for the cold. So I have a very long driveway, and oftentimes I have to clean it at night so that it's ready for departure in the morning. And my first experience with minus 28, sitting on the back of a tractor with no cab, in my insulated overalls that were designed for Ontario and not for Saskatchewan, I came to the realization that if something happened, if I fell off that tractor and I knocked myself out, or for some reason I couldn't get back to the house, I'd freeze to death. That's a different level of preparation that you got to be ready for. There was one instance last winter, actually. I had people here and they had to fly out. I believe it was the next day. And we got snowed in. There was a blizzard. We got snowed in. And the road is a long ways away. And I decided not just to plow my driveway, I decided to plow the road as well, because I wanted to make sure they got to the airport. Only found out later they paid extra money so that they could rebook. I didn't find that out until I got back to the house. Mm-hmm. But I plowed several kilometers of the road, and the sun was setting, and I was really cold, like colder than I've ever been in my life. And by the time I got back to the house, I was close. Like I actually felt worried for my own well-being. If something had happened to me out there, and by that point, my wife was already starting to wonder where I was, because I was gone for hours. Like I was gone for 3/4 of the day, maybe 7 hours I was out there, and I hadn't gone in to get warm. Like I was frozen. You really have to respect the winter here. But it's not bad. It's not bad. You just got to be ready for it. Built my chicken coop with free wood. Good for you, Jack B. It's good to hear you have chicken. Snow with moonlight. One time, Barbara, when I lived in Ontario, I went outside about 2 o'clock in the morning to shovel the driveway. I think my wife might have been pregnant. I think we might have had to go to the midwives the next day. It was something like that. And I used to hand bomb my driveway. It was like a 300-foot driveway, but I had a grain shovel, and that's how I cleared it. Even when I had a tractor, because my tractor didn't like to start in the heat, even if you plugged it in, so I would just hand bomb it whenever I could. So I'm out there. It's a full moon, beautiful night. It was cold, but it was a beautiful night. It was cold for Ontario. And I'm shoveling. I'm just about done the driveway. And I turned to look at the moon, And right behind me, sitting on the road, was a coyote. Not 10 feet from me, just sitting there watching me. And so I saw it, and of course I yelled at it. It started running down the road. And then I kind of regretted my decision because, like, I could have sat there observing it. But it was, I don't know, something about what you just said just reminded me of that. This coyote just sitting there with me, watching me shovel. I don't know if he was thinking about eating me. Don't know if he was just hanging out. But it was something else. Had another experience, actually, here in Saskatchewan. I didn't have the experience. It was actually my wife. She was out cutting the driveway, and she was using the push mower instead of the rider that came with the house. She was using the push mower, getting some exercise, I guess. And so she's coming back down the driveway, and between her and the house, a timber wolf, great big timber wolf, had decided to plunk itself on the driveway between her and the house, just sitting there watching her. And she said, I saw it, lawnmower's going, and she said, I made myself as big as I could, and I screamed at that wolf, and it didn't move. Couldn't care less. Just looked at her curiously. And they stayed like that for a span of time, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute. And then the wolf got up off its butt. It walked about 10 paces into the grass, and then it sat back down. And it just stayed there as she passed with the lawnmower back to the house. She didn't tell me until the next day. I went out and I tracked that thing, and I made sure it understood that it needed to go. I found him. I didn't dispatch him, but I made it understood that he had to go because I couldn't. But it was just the way the wolf just let her pass, almost like an intelligence above what you would ascribe to an animal. Yep, minus 40 is lethal. It is. Minus 40 is lethal. It will kill you. And it will kill you whether you want to die or not. You need shelter. You can't screw around. My late hubby always kept a snowsuit and boots in the trunk of his car. He was a smart man, like ever. You need to be prepared. Dude, so Tony fella, my girlfriend and I were at Harvey's today, and outside of the booth window, we were front seat view to an Indian trucker opening his cab door and pissing right there on the sidewalk. Yeah. Both times I crossed this country, I saw that all along the roadway. Not even trying to hide it. I saw one guy standing up on the cab with his door open, dick flopping in the wind, just pissing right on the side of the road. No decency whatsoever. Coyotes get curious. I had one walk up to my car while I sat at a red light. Yep, they do. They get curious. I had to call into work in Banff. I had an elk blocking my front door. Yeah, it's different. You know, I thought I seen a couple bears in my life while I was living in Ontario, a couple black bears. But now I'm outnumbered by black bears. Like, they're everywhere. You got to be aware every time you leave your house about what wildlife, timber wolves, cougars. Got a picture on a hunting cam of a great big cougar. I don't think you should call it a cougar. It's a mountain lion. Like, it had muscles. It was a big cat. And they're just out there chilling. Another thing you got to be aware of, another reason to have firearms, not to kill them, but generally speaking, the boom from a shotgun is enough to dissuade anything. And then if it doesn't, well, you're going to need it to defend your life. Minus 60 is a game changer. Yeah, I don't really think I need that in my life. Anyway, folks, it's been a couple hours. I hope we had fun. I'm going to go and continue on with, well, planning what I'm going to do tomorrow. That's the rest of my day is going to be trying to finish putting together the information for the video on crime, the history of Canadian crime. hopefully it doesn't end up like so many other things that I try to do. And there's certain videos that I've went and tried to make in my time, and they just never get made because the situation moves on. But thanks for hanging out. I really appreciate all of you. And I want to do more of this. I don't want to do it sitting at my desk, though. I want to maybe get a move on with having a setup over there where we could just hang out for a lot longer and have it be more chill. But I appreciate all of you. Without you guys, none of this happens. And I'll see you